Hi, everyone. Welcome. Such a precious time that we share together. We're really in a deep prayer to the Spirit to really show us the way moment by moment to loosen from our belief in the false identity, the image that was made to take the place of our beloved Christ self. And so you might say that time and space seem to be part of a hypnotism or a mesmerism or a fog. Let's just call it a fog. We've been in the fog and now we want to get out of the fog. We want to rise up beyond the fog and experience the precious light and all that warm love that we were given in our creation. So every week we come to these sessions on Saturday, and through Facebook polls and tribe polls, we basically put out a series of 5 themes, and then we ask people to vote or just say what they want most to dive into on Saturday. So we keep it very relevant, very practical, and I know when I see the results of what comes in, that's what I start in with my prayers. I just am praying to Jesus, help us experience in a direct way the theme that is most important for all of us. And of course, some of you read through the themes and you vote for all 5. That's good too. we don't mind. We understand. We want it all. We want to know our true self, our true reality. So that's good too. But generally, we take a look and see what themes are there, and then we go from there. And we pray for a direct experience. So this week, the theme that came in first place by far is fully saying yes to the present moment. Wow. In what seems to be a world of time and space, a world of many, many distractions, a world of so many images, and that seems to be just exploding images, more images. The more that we watch time go before us, we see more exploding images, and it seems to be lots of complexities and competition and conflict, and you might say it's the world is trying to draw our attention, our mind's attention, into the form. And Jesus says that, this is what the world of specifics is. It's just idle images that were meant to keep you from going inside and remembering who you are. So because that came in number 1, that is the strong prayer for this week, this Saturday, fully saying yes to the present moment. The second theme was discover my calling and follow it, with an exclamation point after that. Really follow it. This is not like a side priority. It's like waking up to our beloved Creator is top priority. Discover my calling and follow it. And a lot of people on the spiritual journey, they actually will tell me, they say, I had to wait until I felt it. But once I felt my inner calling, then that made the decision easy. Like it was somehow preordained or destined that I was to follow this inner voice and wake up to remember God. It's almost like it's activated, but it's also destined. So many people tell me once they really felt that inner calling, that was all she wrote for this world. They had no interest in dilly-dallying or compromising or delaying. The interest in delay is gone down, 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 and the passion to wake up is very strong. The third one is deepen my desire for God. I think all of us know that there's a desire inside of us to know the truth, and you can call it a desire for God, a desire to remember God, a desire to bring an end to this memory problem, this amnesia, where we seem to have remembered something else that's very strange and very disorienting. And then when we come back to the love, we start to really get focused in. And that's what this third theme is, deepen my desire for God. Number 4, transcend the body through function. Instead of the movie and the famous phrase, show me the money, we're saying, show me the glory of God. Show me the light. Show me eternity. That's what I want to be shown. I'm not interested in the trinkets of this world. I want to know the truth of who I really am and who created me. That's the burning passion inside. So that involves transcending the body through function. And we could say the function is forgiveness, to learn how to forgive illusions and accept the truth. And finally, I take the second place to gain the first. That's a variation of, I choose the second place to gain the first, which is a workbook lesson in A Course in Miracles. So it's basically saying, let me be humble. Let me release all pride, all arrogance, all sense of a personality self, and let my awareness merge back into the all, into the everything, into the love, into the oneness. I would rather know myself as the all, as God created me, instead of to identify with this little mask, this little personality mask, because identifying with the body and with the mask has just brought experiences of stress, anxiety, confusion, fear, guilt, suffering. You know, it's like when you just even begin to look at the list of all these emotions that are generated by identifying with the personality self instead of our vast, vast Christ self that is a perfect creation of God, then it starts to be, okay, I'm ready to, whatever I've been doing, I'm ready to open up to the truth of my being. And I have heard different people say that when you are identified with the personality self and with time and space, everything is about gaining something, achieving something, reaching something in time and space, trying to be superior. We have strange notions of productivity, that somehow we're supposed to be productive in time and space. And I think all of the great spiritual traditions, whether you go through Buddhism or Hinduism, you go through the ancient scriptures of the Vedas, you look at A Course in Miracles, all of these amazing perennial wisdom teachings are saying, no, the pathway to know yourself and to know God is to drop the mask, drop the pursuits, accept who you are right now, and drop the pursuits of time, which are saying that you were not worthy in the past and you need to do something to be good enough, to be worthy enough or respected enough. And I think we're learning from the perennial wisdom, we can stop this now. This game of not good enough, it's not our destiny. We don't need to play that game. Right now, we're perfect as we are right now, so why should we try to improve on perfection? If God created us perfect right now in eternity, and the present moment is the gateway to eternity, the closest approximation of time that is given to us is right now. So it must be that right now we are innocent. We are whole and complete right now. That's the truth. And then we have to drop all beliefs and thoughts that would tell us that we are lacking, that we are somehow falling short, that somehow we are not deserving of this beautiful essence that we truly are. So this is going to be fun today. I'm going to have so much fun with you. I hope you have as much fun as I'm going to have today, because when I looked at that first theme, fully saying yes to the present moment, I just prayed and prayed to Jesus. I said, this is really what we're all calling for. We want to devote ourselves to the present moment, but in this world it seems like there's so much else that's before us. It's like the trick is trying to distract us into everything but the present moment. You know, people say, don't waste time. Time is money. And a lot of times we hear phrases like, well, I've got some time to kill this afternoon, or, you know, all these cliches about time. And actually, I think we're more interested in the present moment than we are about time in general. We would love it if we could come drop into the simplicity of the present moment and have no worries, no cares, no anxieties, and no regrets, and no grievances. In fact, I would say the present moment offers everything that we want. In fact, I think if you go fully into this moment, you'll find you can't even find an opinion in the present moment. Isn't that delightful? What a life. If somebody says, what's your opinion about this? You can say, I have no idea. I'm very content in this moment, but I have absolutely no idea about an opinion on anything. So when I prayed to Jesus this time, instead of getting something that's longer, he gave me like a two-part presentation today. And the first part of that presentation, are you ready? You might want to write this down. The first part is called The Fabric of the Cosmos, the Illusion of Time. That's what we're going to immerse our mind in first. The fabric of the cosmos, the illusion of time. And some of you are familiar with Brian Greene, and he's a scientist, a very friendly, very expanded mind, a very curious, like many scientists are. He's quite interested in looking closely of what does time actually mean to us. You know, it's one thing to keep time with a watch or a clock, but what does time actually mean? You know, he'll say, we always talk about time. It seems like it's part of every aspect of our experience of this world. But when you actually ask people, what is it? Then they sometimes, don't ask me to define it. It's what I deal with all the time. But they don't really know what it is. And he's pretty curious. What is time? And of course, Brian Greene will take us on a journey involving Einstein. And when Einstein was young, when he was growing up and around Switzerland, where we all think of Swiss watches and timepieces, he was growing up when it was a big deal to measure time, to wear time on your wrist, or to make beautiful clocks as furniture. He was growing up in an era where it seemed to be a big deal, this thing of time. But we know Einstein was never just accepting the surface of things. He started to question, what is it really? And I think Einstein was in the first wave of all the great quantum physicists that came along. And as I've said hundreds of times, quantum physics really takes us beyond empirical science. It takes us beyond Newtonian science, which is kind of like the previous, they called it common sense view of the world. And part of that is that the time just exists. This is what Isaac Newton said. He said, I'm not interested in probing anything about time. It's just there. But then Einstein comes along and it's like, is it really? What's really? Maybe we need to, it's like saying there's an elephant in the room. Well, it's just there. Well, Einstein was more concerned, like, what is it? What is this thing we call time, linear time? And so we're going a bit down the rabbit hole with our first segment, the fabric of the cosmos, the illusion of time. Now, I know some of you are saying, if the goal that Jesus has got for us is fully saying yes to the present moment, why is it that we have to watch a segment of scientists looking at the belief in time? And it's like with A Course in Miracles, Jesus will say, here are the laws of chaos, and this is what you believe. And when he goes through the laws of chaos in his text, he will say, you may disagree. You may say, I don't believe in any of these things, Jesus. You're just coming up with laws of chaos, but I don't believe in these laws of chaos. And he says, brother, if you think your feet stand on solid ground, you do believe them. You see how Jesus is so sweet. He gives us the laws of chaos, and he knows the first thing that we'll say is, not me, Lord. I believe in love. I am not a fan of the laws of chaos. And he's like, well, actually, if you believe your feet are on solid ground, you do believe them. So that's why our first segment today is going to be the fabric of the cosmos, the illusion of time. I am going to have so much fun today because we are thoroughly going to look at time and see that it is a trick. It's not just something that's there, like Isaac Newton said, and it's certainly not an absolute. A lot of times people will say, and in fact, if you go to university and you study all these different fields of thought and fields of study, they're all rooted in the belief in linear time. And I've never gone to a university where on the entrance registration to get into the university, they ask you if you believe in time or not. They just don't even ask the question. They're so mesmerized in Newtonian empirical perception of the world that it's like that's the accepted thing. And some people would say, David, don't be ridiculous. You're never going to go to a university and be asked if you believe in time. They would say, that's like interviewing a fish telepathically in the ocean and say, do you believe in water? And I'd say, I would do that. I mean, I think a fish and I could have a deep joining of spirit. We might be able to dispel the water belief. Wouldn't that be fun? That would be a transcendent experience. We're not talking about a fish out of water. We're seeing no fish and no water. That's the kind of fun I have. These are the kind of discussions I enjoy. How can we actually start to dispel everything that we believe in? And so what if if everything that we believe in is based in linear time, who cares? So what? Now what? Maybe now we're ready to let go of the whole thing. Maybe now we're ready for eternity. Maybe now we're ready for joy that has no break, just constant state of joy, constant state of happiness. And to do that, we have to see the trick of time. You've heard me talk a bit in the past about Brian Greene. You know, what I like about Brian Greene, he loves to bring in the graphics, and he kind of shows the Big Bang, and then this kind of, it looks like a loaf of bread. The cosmos actually looks like a loaf of bread. And then he goes slicing the loaf of bread, and he tries to dissect it for us and try to figure out the impossible. Because the Course is teaching us, Jesus is saying, the separation never happened. So this loaf of bread actually never got baked, and neither was there a Big Bang. Wow, ooh, that's good. So I know if you're interested in going with me today, we're going to go back prior to the Big Bang. You've heard of entropy, which is the movement towards disorder. And now the scientists agree the cosmos is moving toward increasing disorder, and it's accelerating. It's not slowing down. It's just the cosmos is an accelerating projection of the ego, so it shouldn't surprise us that it's just accelerating disorder. And meanwhile, we want to have order. But what Jesus is going to teach us is we don't get order by arranging the contents of time and space. We come into order, where God orders our thoughts in spirit, by going prior to the loaf of bread, prior to time. As Jesus taught, before Abraham was, I am. Before the loaf of bread of the cosmos was, I am. Before the conundrum of entropy seemed to be, I am. I am the light that's prior to time. I'm not in time. I've never been in time. That's been the hallucination. That's been the story. Everything we have, even in terms of reincarnation, they're all stories in the loaf of bread. But today, I tell you, we're going to hop out of that loaf of bread. And then I'm going to have a brief musical interlude where you can take a pause after the first segment and feel the joy of coming into the light. And then the next one is going to be, of course, once you start to see the trick of time, then what should you devote yourself to? That's part 2. I'm going to show you exactly what to devote your mind to in a very direct way in part 2. So, as Jesus teaches, nothing real can be threatened. The I am presence cannot be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. He's talking about the cosmos and linear time. Herein lies the peace of God. So we're going to go through a very experiential movement today. What will come in part 2 will be a very devoted symbol of being of one mind with one desire to remember God. And this single desire, like Jesus taught in the Bible, let thine eye be single, or as he teaches us, when you have only one desire, and that desire is for God, then you become ready to return to creation or heaven. And that is something that I think we discover at some point, like, wow, that must be the purpose of everything, is to discover my true reality and to discover that I last forever, that I'm not limited to the body and to the things of time. So that second segment, I think, is going to be delightful, because you're going to hear witnesses in that second segment. Witnesses of people who tried it out. They tried the loaf of bread out of time, and then they just thought, this isn't really my purpose. I really shouldn't be devoting my mind into the things of time. most of us have not seen lots of examples. I think over the last 36 years, I've seen lots and lots of examples, but I think growing up through my childhood and my adolescence and my 20s, it's not like my world, my dream was peppered full of witnesses saying, drop everything and be the eternal being that you are. That's just, I never had a professor that said that to me. My parents didn't tell me that. And it was even kind of hard to find a book that would just say, you open it up, drop everything, and be the eternal being that you are. You know, that would be a pretty short book if that was it. But those were not coming around. Most of us had lots of other witnesses about grow up, be somebody, attain something, achieve something, and have a goal in the world. When actually the Spirit is saying, I want you to begin to be willing to really drop it in your mind, not in fear, but in joy. Drop the mask in joy, not in fear, just in absolute joy. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I'm going to. This is going to be a very fun ride today. We're going to go from science, and we're going to have an interlude of music, and then we're going to go into religious life. It's kind of a segue. Science, I'm talking expansive science, then a beautiful segue, then we're going to go into the life of devotion. So enjoy the ride with me. I think you're going to be convinced, just like me, this is it. Okay, here we go. Now this is the problem with empirical science. It's based on the belief that if you can measure something, that helps you understand it. And it's based on the belief that the more accurate you are in measuring something of this world, the more understanding that you'll have of it. The problem is God doesn't know of measurements. This is an invention of the ego, and the ego is trying to generate a false sense of meaning based on empiricism, based on the world it projected to keep the mind asleep and dreaming. So you can see that throughout history, there have been all these improvements in terms of measuring time, but the underlying fallacy is that somehow measuring time will yield meaning and understanding. And it doesn't. Even though now we can use a cesium atom, and when you throw light at it, there's these 9+ billion different changes of frequency. And even though you can break down a second into 9 billion plus of these little shifts and ticks, that hasn't brought an end to conflict. That hasn't brought an end to war or hunger. It hasn't brought an end to suffering. And you can see that even the scientists who've been studying this for many years, decades, centuries, the more that they study the measurement of time, they simply say it's still a mystery. Like they have got no meaning from all that measurement. And what would I say if you were trying to measure nothing and you kept finding more accurate ways to measure nothing? Like Shakespeare said, much ado about nothing. That's what he called this world, much ado about nothing. And so this is the great fallacy of empiricism, of trying to find the truth through the five senses, through measurement, through testing, through experiment. And, you know, there's even Course in Miracles teachers that still are looking at research studies. Research shows, or survey says, and there's just no way that you come to know who you are, or you come to true meaning through empirical science. And of course, I always talk about the philosopher Immanuel Kant, who asked the question, how do we know what we know? Jesus is telling us that we must come to the realization of meaning through our intuition, through prayer, through inner questioning, inner contemplation, meditation. You know, we have to go within ourselves toward the light of who we are. And that light is prior to time. So it's a very different direction to go for God through theology, through rituals, through repetitions. You notice how the ego will even make the search for God into a bunch of repetitions, repeating things over and over and over, hoping that something is going to change. Again, I think it was Einstein who said, you cannot solve the problem at the level of the problem. You must go beyond the level of the problem to find the solution. He was, again, without even using the words, he was basically saying what Jesus is teaching us. You have to go to the holy instant prior to time to find the meaning. And you can't figure it out. If you believe you're a human being in a context of linear time, just like we think of the animals in a context of linear time. We think of the earth and the planets and the spheres, the galaxies, the black holes, the stars, the quasars. We think of all this as kind of our context for being human. And then we wonder why we're so perplexed. Why am I uncertain? I've done the things that I thought I needed to do to be a happy, fully functioning human being, and there is a question mark. Like, why do I still feel unfulfilled? Why do I still feel at times volatile with these emotions that move through the mind? So the first part we're starting to see is science has looked upon time as something to be understood, we might say intellectually, and part of that intellectual understanding, which I think is actually an oxymoron, it's a contradiction of terms. I would never put those two words together. But these are attempts to try to figure out something that doesn't exist. What would you think if you spent so much effort to try to figure out something that in the end doesn't even exist at all? You can see what a use of mind energy to try to understand something that you can never understand, but you can forgive. And by forgive, I mean release. You can release your mind from the belief. So we're going to go a little further now because we're going to get a little context. Again, Isaac Newton comes along and says, time is an absolute. It's like your baseline. Now, let's work on everything else, but the baseline is time, and time is an absolute. And then we're going to see the evolution of going beyond that idea to what Einstein would say is, no, actually, time and space are related. They're actually related in proportion to one another, and then we're going to see as we move on that gravity is involved in this and motion. So we can't just say time is absolute. We have to then start to see how time, how space, how motion, and how gravity are all connected in a relative way. I mean relative because motion is relative, time is relative, space is relative, and gravity. These are all speaking in relative terms, and all of them show us that the old Newtonian view of time that 1 second is always 1 second. 1 second in Austria equals 1 second in the Netherlands, equals 1 second in China, equals 1 second in India, equals 1 second in Russia. Einstein's like, I don't think so. Wow, that's a mind. I don't think so. I don't think 1 second equals 1 second everywhere in the planet or everywhere in the cosmos. And then we're going to see it just unravel. We're going to see that time is just part of wishful thinking, that time is part of selective perception, that time for one person is not the same for another. And you probably have had some experiences of that, where you meet someone and they're happy-go-lucky and they're just laughing and talking and laughing, and then they laugh and go, oh, I have no idea what time it is. That's right, their awareness is not on the passage of time. And then you have other people you meet who are always, every 30 seconds, looking at their watch or looking at their iPhone. You're having a deep conversation and then suddenly they're starting to look at the clock. It's all selective perception. It's time is what we wish it to be. If we wish for time to be slow, it's slow. If we wish for time to be fast, it's fast. And here's the good news from Jesus. If you wish for time to be non-existent, and that is the prayer to the Holy Spirit, watch out. Your mind is going to be lifted up into a realm that we'll call timeless. It's eternal, it's timeless. If that's what you want, if you want to know God so much, your mind is then lifted up into a timeless state of being. So here we go. Let's let Brian and Einstein and Newton try to be part of the unraveling of the story of time. Now, you start to see that what happens when you invent something like time and you try to live by it. In the early days, these were simple farming communities, simple little towns. And they raised cattle, or they had sheep. It was agricultural, and they were living, and they really weren't that concerned with time. These were simpler times, we'll say. And they basically were it was life on the farm, and maybe go to the store and buy something. If the store is closed, come back some other time. You don't need store hours. And what time is it? Who really, it's like that Chicago song, the group Chicago. Time, does anybody really know what time it is? Care, does anybody really care about time? Oh, one of my favorite groups. Questioning time, Chicago. Questioning time in their lyrics. Does anybody really care? So imagine these simple days going through, and what time is it? Well, we'll call it noon when the sun is somewhere kind of up there. And then in the next town, we'll call it noon when the sun is up there somewhere. You see how beautiful, how simple? This is an invention, and there's not any need to measure it, explore it. Imagine these people just waking up in the morning, putting on their clothes, going out there to do a little farming. La, 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 live for today. Hey, for technology? No. La, 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 live for today. Hey, and don't worry about tomorrow anyway. And then they invent this thing called railroads. And all of a sudden, we just have one track. We can just afford one track. But nobody's paying attention to time. And so two trains explode because nobody has given enough thought to the invention of time. But obviously, what do we see when these trains hit and it explodes? There's a problem. The problem isn't the trains colliding. The problem is that time is an invention. And now, not only have you invented it, you believe your body is at the mercy of Father Time, of aging. It's you believe now that you start to be, unlike other animals, you start to think, how many years do I have left to live? You ever look into the eyes of a cat? You notice the eyes of a cat don't have that look about concern for how long am I going to live. It's, are you going to open the door for me? Are you going to feed me? Are you see how it's very basic and simple for the cat. But humans, oh, how long do I have to live? Oh, how many years or weeks or months, you see? So Brian Greene is showing us with the history of time that there seemed to be a time, I'm sure with cavemen, it was the same thing. I don't think time was that big of a deal. Maybe they had other stresses, like being eaten. But actually, they weren't so stressed out and anxious about the passage of time. I don't think the cavemen were actually that stressed out about time. Nowadays, people have their resumes and what did you do with your time? How much time did you spend on getting educated? How much time did you spend on getting skills? How much time have you invested in the body? How much time have you invested in your family, your children, your company? You see time. The pressures are building up because of an invention that is basically from the ego. And believe me, time is an invention. God didn't create time. And Jesus tells us in the Course that there is no such thing as past, present, and future. Jesus says in the Course that the ego forces continuity on this concept of past, present, and future. Jesus is actually saying there is no continuity in linear time. It's a trick. It's an invention. It has no existence whatsoever. And he even goes so far as to say that time and eternity will conflict in your mind until you use one, time, to reach the other, eternity. So he's telling us we have to use time in a different way than we're accustomed to it. We have to use time in a way that helps us release time. That the Holy Spirit uses time in order to teach you that there is no time. This is not a contradiction. This isn't some kind of crazy equation. You can follow that. The Holy Spirit uses time to teach you that there is no time. The Holy Spirit uses the body in communication to teach you that you are not a body, you are spirit. And so it's all part of a transition of purpose. And we actually need this new purpose for everything, including time. We actually have to let go. Jesus says in the workbook, his workbook lessons, that he says, I have to introduce new time ideas because our old time ideas are keeping us stuck in death mode. And he is trying to get us to click over to eternal life mode. And that's a big switch from death mode to eternal life mode. So here we are. Let's keep following here, but I hope you're seeing that time, as soon as you start to give importance to it, then you have to control it. Then you have to measure it. Then you have to manipulate it. Think about a daily life where you go through a day trying to control and manipulate time. In favor of what? In favor of some past learning value. It has nothing to do with the present moment. Maybe you're trying to save time, you're trying to be efficient, but you still have to believe in time before you would believe in saving time. Maybe you're trying to lose time. Some of us on the spiritual journey, I think, we've been trying to lose time. We can't get it off. It's like sticky paper. We just, oh, I want to be spiritual. I want to know the present. Oh my God, I love you. Damn, another day. I can't get it off me. It's stuck. It's stuck. And so we're going down the rabbit hole today. We're going to explore time so deeply that I hope by the end of this session, before we get to the Q&A, even before the Q&A, I hope you are so ready to drop it that you will jump into the opportunity to drop it. You will just say, I would rather be clueless and guided and carried than to think that I know anything at all whatsoever about linear time. That's my goal. That's my goal today. I hope we're gonna go into this together. Okay, we just saw the trains explode. Now let's go back to that point. Okay, now we got to take this slow because I want you to follow me on this. So what Einstein is seeing, he's going to his job as a patent clerk in Bern, and he's noticing all these inventions of clocks and watches. And the key thing is beginning to synchronize time. Because if we go back to that farmer who's just living on the land and living out in nature, when he sees the sunshine over his head, and he says, let's call it noon, let's call it midday, let's call it something. That's basically a relative perception. We just learned that people in different towns were keeping their own time. And that would be like saying the people are keeping their own perception of time, right? What time is it? Oh, it's getting close to noon, or it's getting close to midday. You see how loose that is? It's like, yeah, kind of jam. Who cares anyway? It's just a ball of light in the sky anyway. I gotta get my cows and get some sheep, some wool to make some clothes to stay warm. I'm not interested in time. But as soon as we have inventions like railway and then highways and buses and then airlines, oh, I should show that movie 222. You think gets neurotic about time. Maybe that's our next week's movie. But actually you can see that initially it's probably to the farmer, time is kind of a perceptual thing. Like, yeah, it's probably kind of in the middle of the day. I don't know exactly what time it is, but the sun's up there. But as soon as we start to feel a need to find agreement, remember, if this is all a projection, none of it's true. But imagine the ego projected out the people and the time and the celestial bodies, and what it is, it's coming to a false sense of agreement. If it's an invention and you can seem to project out bodies that seem to believe in it and find it important, and make more inventions where it becomes more important, and more inventions where it becomes more important, then suddenly you start to not think of time as just a perception, as just a preference. Like would be warmth. Oh, I think maybe it's noon or midday. Well, maybe it's comfortable, it's warm today. And then once you start sharing that with other people, isn't that a trick to start to make it seem real? If you start synchronizing clocks, then suddenly it's not just a perception, it starts to be an actual thing. And the more watches and the more clocks and the more computers and the more iPhones and now you measure it with atoms vibrating 9 billion plus times, and you call that an accurate second. Within accuracy of like 200 million years, that you've got a pretty accurate second using this cesium atom. And the angels are just going like, oh my God, it doesn't even exist. And now you're measuring it with inaccuracy to 900 billion vibrations of a cesium atom. You can see why the angels laugh all the time, because there is no time. It's a perception. It's a false identity perception. You are created as the Christ, and you're an eternal being. And what God creates is real and true. So your real identity doesn't even know about time. And the false identity is like in a big mix of time. Now there's watches, there's clocks, and the thing is they've been accepted as real and true. That's the thing. These are now devices and people talking. We go to a stadium and we say, I'm going to a track meet, and we watch 7 bodies run down a piece of concrete or something in staying in their lanes, and whoever crosses the tape first wins. What is win? What is time? What is race? What is competition? Do you think God, the God of eternity, had anything to do with such a strange place as Earth and this cosmos? The perception of Earth as a bunch of fragmented, meaningful little aspects. And if you think I'm making this up, maybe you should read lesson 184. Put that down in your notes. Read lesson 184 and see what Jesus says in the first paragraph of workbook lesson 184. If you think I'm making this stuff up, this is just the Holy Spirit having some fun. He's riffing with all of us. And so what I'm saying is, when we get stressed about time, we're really stressed about a false identity that God didn't create. We're really stressed about a perception that involves all of time and space and motion and gravity, all four one tangled web, one cosmic tangled web of misidentity. And that is where our problem is. It's not that the trains are colliding, because even now, that was centuries ago. Let's say that was back, we'll say in like the 1800s, and now we're 2022. And occasionally we still have a plane crash. It's pretty rare, but we still have a plane crash. Or if you remember that Tom Hanks movie, Sully, very rare that you have a double bird strike. But we've invented these big, giant steel birds now, the wacky world. There's steel birds that put the little bodies, and they all get into the steel birds, and that steel bird took off, and then it was still over New York City when it had a double bird strike, where birds flew into both jet engines. And thank God for Sully. He was a demonstration of the Holy Spirit. He just followed his prayer and intuition and landed the plane on the Hudson River. Wow, I love examples of intuition. I love examples of prayer. He went against the books. He landed the plane safely. All the bodies were safe. Nobody perished. And then he was grilled. He was grilled for every move that he made. Every prayerful, intuitive move that man made, he was grilled. Oh, you could have turned back. You should have done this. You could have, would have, should have. Hypotheticals. So what we're going to get to is time itself and space are part of perception, and perception is highly variable. God didn't create it. It's highly shifting and changing, seemingly, in the false perception. It seems to shift and change. I will go so far as to say, once you accept a constant purpose in your mind, it will stabilize all the perception. The only way to stabilize events of time and space is you have to get all the way back into your mind to the point of forgiveness. And Jesus says this in a course, in Miracles, only a constant purpose can stabilize events. Only a constant purpose can stabilize events. That's right. That's what all the yogis were talking about. That's what all the mystics are talking about. Maybe we poke fun. I know people that poke fun at the mystics. They think, what a boring life. They just sit in their room and pray all day, and oh boy, the most boring life ever. Listen, they were onto it. They were onto the trick of time. They were actually praying for guidance, praying to have their mind released from the belief in time, released from perception through forgiveness, through Jesus teaching them how to forgive the world. Okay, I'm getting excited here. This is a brief little thing, but I think I'm getting excited, and I haven't even got to part 2 yet. So we're getting deep now, and these differences in the perception of time and the perception of space are so tiny and so incremental that most people say, oh, I don't know. I think Newton sounds a lot simpler. Time is just time. Time is just time. I'm not going to mess with it. I'm just stuck in time. But now Einstein's saying, no, if you're in motion, then that takes away. You will perceive time as moving slower. Now, in my years, in the last 36 years, I've been on lots of planes, lots of trains. I've been in 49 of the United States. I've been in 44 countries. I didn't start off flying in planes, but then I started taking like plane flights and like 12-hour flights from San Francisco to Brisbane or to Sydney or to Melbourne. And I'll tell you, when I was up in that plane for 12 hours, I think I perceived time was going a little slower. And I've done so many travels. This body's been in motion more than most people, more than Einstein ever could imagine. This body's been, for the last 30 years, it's been all over the place. I mean, this thing has been moving, until the pandemic, move. And so you see the body's moving, he's saying, is in proportion to time. So it's not just about time. It's like when you seem to perceive movements through space, that influences your perception. And then I started having miracles and meeting, I said, Pete, over there, and we've got people from different parts of the world, and we've got communities starting and centers starting, and we're just dancing and hugging and talking about our miracles, and then we're broadcasting them, and we're doing this. Now I don't think time is slowing down for me, it's just disappearing. I'm getting swallowed up in the miracle. And that's the whole point. That's why Jesus called his book A Course in Miracles, because he knew that our mind is so addicted to the belief in the ego and to the belief in linear time that we need a new purpose for the world, a new purpose in our minds that will change our perception of time, that will help us go from seeing time as long and linear to the present moment. That's what a miracle does. A miracle is a way of saving time, of collapsing time, of bringing the alpha and the omega back together. And you can see from this that Einstein is just saying that it's all relative. In fact, you heard Brian Greene say it, Einstein would say it too, that no two people perceive time, space the same way. That's why we have all the conflicts. Because forget relationships, we can't even agree on time and space. You know, imagine on the honeymoon, instead of having sex, you just had a good time-space conversation. You know, hey, honey, what do you think about time-space? Well, I think it's an individual perception. And that's exactly what Einstein said. He realized that every person had their own seeming perception of time-space. No two people see the same world. That's why we have so much disharmony. Because no two people, by definition, see and perceive the same world because of their variable perceptions of time-space. Some tell me the world's getting worse. Some tell me the world's getting better. Some tell me it's accelerating towards Armageddon. Others tell me it's slowly dancing itself into paradise. But these variable perceptions are just variable perceptions. None of them are true. None of them. God didn't create any of this. So now you start to realize, when you go much deeper, that everybody seems to have a variable perception. Now, what is underneath that? We just heard Brian Weiss say it, that the belief is that everybody has their own private perception of time and space. Everyone has their own private perception of the world. And where do these private perceptions come from? Private thoughts. Now we're getting down to the good stuff. Private thoughts, secrets. God doesn't know of secrets. Holy Spirit doesn't know of secrets. But if you have thoughts that you would just keep for yourself, just for your own person, and you would not share them with the whole universe. That's why people don't like to get too much into transparency, because they're afraid if they're too transparent about their private thoughts that the whole world will cave in on them, come after them. Oh my gosh, if they knew. But this is why we emphasize no private thoughts and no people-pleasing, because you will see in part 2 today that the only way you can come to know communion, the only way you can come to know full communication, is to not be willing to release the private thoughts. If you want to protect private thoughts, you will hold on to a private perception of time and space, and this is what Jesus called wrong-mindedness. This will not bring you to the kingdom of heaven. Wrong-mindedness does not, it keeps you stuck in time, stuck in a false perception of time. So if you read chapter 15 about the holy instant, there's so many great quotes from Jesus about you have to have full communication with all your brothers and sisters before you can wake up to the kingdom of heaven. You can't hold on to the private thoughts, because these private thoughts are ego thoughts. And these thoughts are what is producing the private world, the distorted belief in time and space. There couldn't be a better way than for me to first show this segment on quantum physics, basically, and what's going on in perception, because it shows you without a shadow, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the problem isn't time itself, but the problem is believing in the ego. And the ego generates all these differences of time, space, motion, that Einstein talked about just now, and then, we will get into gravity too. He will talk about that later on. What is the movie we like so much, Christopher Nolan, with where they go off to the black hole? Interstellar, yeah, Interstellar. Interstellar is a great movie for showing how different the perception is when you come closer to the intense gravitational field of what's called a black hole. Because a black hole is not just a little more different gravitational field than Earth, and it's more than 1 million or millions of times different, stronger than planet Earth. It's actually, that's right, a black hole is billions of times stronger of gravitational pull. And it literally is such a gravitational pull, it's so strong, it slows down time. That's why our main character in Interstellar, when he goes there and he comes back and meets his daughter, it's a strange meeting. When one ages and one doesn't. Imagine meeting your grandmother and she's been off in a black hole and she's 30 years younger than you are. Granny, what have you been eating? You see, this is the ego always thinks eating has something to do with aging. It doesn't. The ego thinks exercising has something to do with aging. It doesn't. The ego thinks that the DNA that you have in your body has something to do with aging. It doesn't. It's all private thoughts. It's all private thoughts in the mind. It's all judgments, self-judgments, ego judgments. That's the culprit of this false time-space perception. And once you start to see that, you're not going to be so concerned about that candy bar. You know? People always talk about, better watch your candy consumption. Well, I grew up in a family where my grandmother lived to be 99. She outgrew like 5 doctors who told her to stop eating so much candy. She outlived the doctors. But she was very devoted to God. She was very simple and happy. She was so joyful and happy. And she could even eat loads of candy and live to be 99 in the world's perception, because it all comes down to private thoughts and judgments. That's where you go for the healing, is not to hide them. Don't hide your emotions. Don't hide the darkness. Just let it come up and give it to the Holy Spirit, and then that's how we come to eternity faster. Okay, we're still going more deeper into time and space here. Okay, now that you're all thoroughly confused, I'm going to bring you back to Jesus. Because the loaf of bread, everywhere I go in the world, everybody's always quoting this one passage for Jesus in the workbook, the script is written. That loaf of bread is the script is written. That loaf of bread that seems to come, with the Big Bang, which is a big separation going from gases to, planets and orbits and stars and all these, what seems to come after the Big Bang. We'll get into this later on, so we'll go back to entropy and all this good stuff. But I want to simplify first of all. That loaf of bread is the script is written. Everything that could ever occur after the Big Bang has already happened. It's over. It's gone. It's done. Jesus says we are simply mentally reviewing what has already gone by. That loaf of bread was handled by the Holy Spirit in 1 second, in less than a second. It was simultaneous. The loaf of bread, which the projection of the error called ego, and it seemed to be kind of a big projection. We're talking about the whole cosmos is that loaf of bread. But don't you like how Brian Greene puts the entire cosmos into a loaf of bread? Oh, I adore this guy. This is what I've been trying to talk about for the last 30 years. And people are scratching their head everywhere I go to a castle in Holland. Everyone's, what? David, can you explain the script is written again? I don't understand. It's the loaf of bread. Everything that seemed to come after that Big Bang is the loaf of bread. And when he just said the past and the present and the future are all the same, they're all equally the same, that's because the ego invented the past, the ego invented the concept of the future, and this thing that he's calling now moments, that's an ego invention too. Because what? The present is before time was. The present moment is not squeezed in between the past and the future. Jesus said it 2,000 years ago, before Abraham was, I am. Before the loaf of bread was, I am. Before the cosmos of time and space was, I am. And now you know why you feel anxiety. Because as long as you perceive yourself as inside of that loaf of bread, it doesn't matter what theology you hold. It doesn't matter whether you're atheist. You identify as atheist or agnostic or a true believer. It doesn't matter whether you identify as a male or female, bisexual. It doesn't matter if you say, I'm an android. I've turned into an android. It doesn't matter whether you believe in AI or not. It doesn't matter what you believe in, as long as you believe your identity is inside of that loaf of bread. Nothing you think or say or do is going to matter, because if you believe you're inside of that loaf of bread, maybe you believe in reincarnation. Maybe you think you'll come with a different slice, you know, like this time. Next time I'm going to manifest better skills. I'm going to be a lot more beautiful, handsome the next time around. I'm going to be I'm going to draw my soulmate with, I'm going to have the best body. I'm going to be the best hair, teeth. I'm going to really get it right. I'm going to get this soulmate stuff right. And another slice, you just give me the chance for another slice. And God is like, I didn't make the loaf of bread. I'm eternal. I created you as the Christ. You're prior to the Big Bang. You're not in the middle. You're nowhere in the middle there. If you think it's going to take you 45 lifetimes to get out, that's just like 45 different positions of nothingness. We're collapsing time here. We're just saying, listen, whatever you were going for in time and space, you need to go back, get your course book out. ISO says, what's going on here? Getting excited. Get your course book out and go to that first lesson of the workbook. Nothing I see means anything. Why? It's a loaf of bread that God didn't create. And then you may get fascinated, like Brian's getting kind of fun. He's got his imaginary, what was it in Star Wars? Lightsaber. Brian's getting excited with his lightsabers. Look, when you angle it, and he's bringing in hypothetical aliens and a hypothetical guy sitting by a gas station. But I'm telling you right now, let's cut the chase here. It doesn't matter how you slice illusion. Illusions are illusions. There's no hierarchy of illusion. That loaf of bread is the trick, that there's different dimensions to time. But time itself doesn't exist. So I hate to burst the New Age bubble, but there are no dimensions of time. I know that some of you are going to astral project later on after you retire and go explore other dimensions and other worlds, other than Urantia. I'm tired of Urantia. I'm going to some new exciting places where I can levitate and I can have as much sex as I want, and I can, No, there are no other dimensions of time, because it doesn't exist. The construct of past, present, future, Einstein knew it was an illusion. Jesus knows it's an illusion. Wouldn't you rather be guided by Einstein's inklings than Jesus' certainty of the nothingness of time and space? And then I know probably you're saying, oh, David, by the end of this session, I'm just going to be as bored. I'm just going to be so bored. No. The I am presence. This is what Buddha was talking about, beyond the void. This is what Jesus is calling the kingdom of heaven. This is eternity. How can you get bored with eternal life? I mean, if that's what you were created as, an eternal being of light, do you actually think that's boring? from the loaf, from inside the loaf of bread, eternity can look, that light at the beginning, prior to the Big Bang, can look a little spooky. It was even spooky for Einstein, but still, this is what we're showing, is you don't have to say there's different now moments and try to figure it out, because ultimately, the present moment is not between the past and the future. It's not between. So if you say, I'm anxious right now, you really are just identifying with the loaf of bread. No one is ever anxious right now. No one is ever fearful now. No one is ever guilty now, because the now is with God. And the now is the light prior to the loaf of bread. So that's why, of course, I need to give some interpretations, but you got to love it, Brian. And these scientists, they're coming up with some cool stuff. They're actually starting to have some inroads, and of course, they're confused about time and the now slices and moments of now. But what they are showing is what Einstein was saying, is that space, time, motion, and we'll see in a little while gravity, all of these aspects of the cosmos are completely interrelated, and they're all relative. It's like an equation with 4 variables, and when you change any one of the variables, the other 3 seem to change, because everything is interconnected. That's the quantum field. But even the quantum field, the field of interconnected energy, is still not the kingdom of heaven. That's just getting close to the Big Bang, to the unified experience that is prior to the Big Bang. So we'll cover this a little bit later as we go into entropy and we go into the cosmos is moving into disorder. But for now, all you have to do is just think, I have never done anything wrong or right, because all of my actions as a body is just a loaf of bread. Talk about bringing an end to guilt and fear. All it was a misperception. I was perceiving myself as a flesh creature somewhere in the loaf of bread, you see? Maybe as an alien, or maybe from another planet. It doesn't matter. That's all the same too. If anybody asks you, do aliens exist? No. Do human beings exist? No. Does the solar system or the galaxies exist? No, because God didn't create any of these things. The loaf of bread of time and space is the great trick of identity, trying to believe you're something that you're not, trying to believe you're a creature bound by time and space, when really it's just the ego throwing out a false identity and then saying, believe it, believe in this thing. Get stressed out about this loaf of bread. We don't even have to eat the loaf of bread. We don't even have to slice it and dice it. We don't even have to eat from it. You can just be in joy and enjoy watching it, but not from inside it. Okay, let's keep going. This is mind-blowing, but what else do we have to do on a Saturday? Okay, there you go. Michael Green took us to our interstellar moment to explain the metaphysics of the physics, astrophysics of Interstellar, the movie. Now, again, though, if we come back deeper in our mind, remember, if the cosmos is a dream, and the entire fabric of the dream is illusion, because it's time, space, and then we can include motion in there now too. Time, space, motion, and now gravity. These are just 4 aspects of false perception. In eternity, there is no time or space or motion or gravity. These are all just ego concepts that the mind has now believed in, and then the cosmos reflects the belief in these concepts. They aren't real, they weren't created, but they're just ego inventions. Now I want to just jump to I believe it's chapter 15, because, it's chapter 15 to kind of put this into Course in Miracle terms, to bring us back to the teachings of Jesus. And what Jesus is saying here in chapter 15 is he's saying the holy instant is a time in which you receive and give perfect communication. You see, that's with no private thoughts. That's actually what's waiting. That's what happens in the I am presence. This means, however, that it is a time in which your mind is open both to receive and give. It is the recognition that all minds are in communication. He's really pointing us to there's just one of us, there's just one mind. It therefore seeks to change nothing, but merely to accept everything. So when Brian Greene is saying, the laws of physics say everything that can happen seems to be able to unhappen, or everything that plays out in one direction seems to be able to go in another direction according to the laws of physics. But physicists are wondering, why is there this strange thing called the flow of time, which always seems to go only in one direction? That's the big mystery in physics. But let's see if we can find the clue from Jesus in the last thing that I read. I read, it therefore seeks, it's talking about the mind, it therefore seeks to change nothing, but merely to accept everything. So let me try to put this in a metaphysical context. Imagine that you're the Christ, and you're one with God, and you live in an eternal song of gratitude in heaven between Creator and creation, between God and Christ. And the Holy Spirit's there too, because the Holy Spirit's an eternal creation. So it's all one Spirit, it's all joy, it's all eternal love and happiness, unconditional love and happiness and joy. And then imagine that you fell asleep and you dreamed a dream in which you were something else than eternal spirit, okay? You fell asleep, you dreamed a dream, and in the dream, which was made by the ego, God didn't make the dream. God didn't create the cosmos or the earth or anything, gravity, motion, nothing. Just pure spirit. God is pure spirit, Christ is pure spirit, but you fall asleep and you dream the dream, and the dream is made up by the ego, because the false identity is the belief in separation from God. So you're dreaming a dream of separation. And then what you seem to have done is changed your mind about yourself. First, you're sure that you're the Christ, and then suddenly you're not so sure. And there's a tiny mad idea, and you think it's real. So you seem to have changed your identity from an eternal being into a time-space flesh being. And now you have the capability with the Holy Spirit to change back into your eternal being. You can actually remember that you're the Christ, an eternal being. But that belief that you can change back is hijacked by the ego, and it projects the belief that you can change back to as God created you onto the cosmos. It takes the concept of change and it projects it onto the loaf of bread in the form of a crazy thing called linear time that moves from past to future. You see, that's the trick of the arrow of time. It's the belief in change projected onto the illusory cosmos. So now, if you look at the cosmos, if you look out your window, if you turn on the internet, if you turn on the radio, television, you seem to perceive a world that's constantly changing. But that's just the ego tricking the mind by projecting the concept of change onto the images. Now the images seem to be flowing in a linear forward direction, and that's a trick. That's another trick, that time moves forward. Time doesn't even exist, how can it move forward? How can something that doesn't even exist move forward? But that's the trick. Now, some of you have had mystical experiences that are kind of like light episodes, where suddenly in an instant, you know that you're everything and everyone. You don't even need words. When you have a mystical experience, you know it's all one. You're totally loved and connected with everyone and everything because you come back into the light that you are, and then the whole world reflects that connectedness. When you have a mystical experience, you are remembering who you are, and you suddenly see the whole world as the same as you. You see there's no me and you. It's just all love. It's just all love. There's no separation. There's no personalities in this vast love. Now, after I just read that last part, it therefore seeks to change nothing but merely to accept everything. Imagine how much fun that is when you watch the day and you have no desire to change anything about the day. Not the weather, not your bank account, not your hair. Imagine you go through a whole day and you don't have one thought that you're having a bad hair day. Well, I don't have much hair, so I guess that's not a good example. But imagine you don't have one thought that you're too fat or too skinny. Imagine you have no thought of whether you're beautiful or ugly. Imagine you have no thought about getting anything done. Imagine you just are able to look at the kitchen floor and you're able to see a spot of dirt. And you just think, I seek to change nothing, but merely to accept everything. You see how wonderful that would be. And this is what Jesus is calling us to. He's calling us to a state of mind where we accept all things exactly as they are. We don't know what the word productivity even means anymore. Because we're so in the bliss and the beingness of who we are that we don't think, oh, I better do something today. I better be productive. For what? Productive in a loaf of bread that doesn't exist, you start to see. I know people have told me, they said, man, I grew up in the 60s, I thought I was radical. This is radical stuff, David. Because then you wouldn't have ambition to have a better future, because you would realize that ambition doesn't exist. You would realize better and worse are relative terms, just like time, space, motion, and gravity are relative, so are beautiful, ugly, so are better, worse. Let all things be exactly as they are, is the way Jesus says it in one of his workbook lessons. But here's how practical Jesus is. After he says, it therefore seeks to change nothing but merely to accept everything, he gives us the prize. Then the next paragraph starts, how can you do this when you would prefer to have private thoughts and keep them? Ooh, interesting. Interesting that he would come right in when he's just saying, you have to accept everything exactly as it is and change nothing of this world. Now we're getting into the present. We're coming closer to the present moment. How can you do this when you would prefer to have private thoughts and keep them? The only way you could do that would be to deny the perfect communication that makes the holy instant what it is. You believe that you can harbor thoughts you would not share, and that salvation lies in keeping thoughts to yourself alone. For in private thoughts known only to yourself, you think you find a way to keep what you would have alone and share what you would share. And then you wonder why it is that you are not in full communication with those around you and with God who surrounds all of you together. He's giving us the keys to the kingdom. He's simply saying that the private thoughts, the judgments, the preferences, the comparisons that you hold on to in your mind are blocking you from knowing you are in full creation with everyone, with everything, and with God. Still a perfect child of God. So this is the deep metaphysical teaching that Jesus is not just showing us what the scientists are beginning to demonstrate to us, but he's saying, that's not really who you are. You are a being of light that is prior to the Big Bang, prior to the loaf of bread. You are as God created you, and not what you made yourself to be. You invented something else by believing in the ego, but none of it's true. You still are as God created you. Okay, let's get back to our short segment. There it is. We find it on the tombstone. Ha ha ha. We are now cracking the crazy ego perception that time moves forward, that things move toward disorder. There's the equation right on the tombstone. Clog. It's got clog in it. It's a clog in our mind. And that clog is the ego. The ego came up with that equation. We should have been content with Einstein, E equals mc squared, but no, we've got to clog around, and we had to clog things up with the arrow of time. Now let's look at it. The laws of physics, and anybody who studied quantum physics know that the laws of physics say we should be able to go in reverse as well as forward. Everything that happens should be able to unhappen, like that glass of wine dropping, and then shattering, and then going in the other direction. It would be all coming together. But of course, if we watched movies, if we watched Gone with the Wind, or we watched Star Wars, or we watched The Matrix in reverse, suppose you went to the very end of the movie The Matrix, and you played sound-wise and visual-wise, you played the movie backwards, you would probably get pretty bored after a few minutes of and the images and everything going backwards. If you want to have a happy experience, that you should watch Enigma's Return to Innocence famous video. We all like that song, and it's Return to Innocence. Yeah, we're all into that. We don't mind a little bit of backwards motion with Enigma, but if we had to watch the entire Matrix trilogy backwards, sound-wise and image-wise, we probably would be like, David, can I go back to the other way? I kind of like the arrow of time. But the arrow of time is the entropy. Now imagine that the Holy Spirit answered the entire loaf of bread simultaneously. Ego said, here, try this loaf of bread, and the Holy Spirit says, no, thank you. No, thank you. No. Still eternal Christ, still eternal Son of God. What about time? No, thank you. Corrected the instant it seems to happen, corrected. And suppose that correction is kind of like what the physics are showing us. The things should be able to go forward as well as backwards, because why? Because forward and backward are both illusions too. Remember, only what God creates is real. So forward and backward would have to be equally illusory. I know the physicists are not going there yet, but I'm going there. Suppose that masculine and feminine are just concepts. Suppose that male and female are just concepts. Suppose that past and future are just concepts. Suppose that successful and failure are just concepts. Suppose that dead body and live body are still concepts. Some of you are concerned about your diet. You want to eat organic. Suppose organic and inorganic are just concepts. Suppose that intelligent and stupid are just concepts. So this is where the physics are saying, oh, it should be equally possible to go forward or to reverse. And what I'm saying is, they're both equally impossible. But you have to join mwge.org and watch my commentary on Mr. Nobody for an expanded presentation on how there aren't separate lifetimes, because there aren't even consecutive lifetimes, like reincarnation, because the body is not where life is. There is no life in flesh. Flesh is part of the projection of time. It's part of the projection of the ego to try to believe, to give you an alternative, to believe you're something other than the Christ, something other than spirit. So we're going now into the concept of entropy. And basically, I think this is great. That was the Austrian in the grave, that clog hopper of a equation is there, and all that's basically saying is that the ego set up the dream world so that it will seem to move in one direction. If you read A Course in Miracles, Jesus actually says time but seems to move in one direction. He says at one point, time actually goes backwards. What? Time goes backwards toward an ancient instant that is beyond remembering. Whoa, run that by me again, Jesus. Time goes backwards toward an ancient instant that is beyond remembering. He's talking about the loaf of bread again, and he's talking about the Big Bang, and he's saying, you need to trace it back with the Holy Spirit's help, and don't be worried about what your future is. You better try to do the back step with the Holy Spirit. You want to learn to dance? Learn to do the back step. And I'm not talking about the back step in time, in the loaf of bread, but I'm talking about the back step in your mind. When Jesus says, you have not gone back far enough, he's mean, you've got to go back towards that original error. Because beyond the belief in original sin is original innocence. Beyond the belief in sin is the belief that you are a perfect child of God, the I am presence, prior to that loaf of bread, prior to time. You see, that's why he has to train us with the workbook, because our minds are addicted to entropy. We're addicted to the forward arrow of time. Every time you make a plan, it's a plan that involves bodies and places and time, and every single plan is always part of that arrow of time. Now, don't beat yourself up. When you start following the Holy Spirit will still use what the mind believes in, so you still may seem to make plans, but not by yourself. Only guided plans are going to be part of unwinding the mind from this linear belief. So what's so beautiful about this is you start to realize that guidance, your intuition and your guidance, has everything that you need to unwind from that loaf of bread, that cosmic loaf of bread. You don't even have to worry about it. It's already a done deal. It's already scripted. In one sense, I'm to come back in the mind and start to see you're the dreamer of the dream. The ego doesn't like that. The ego made the world so you would never discover that you're the dreamer of the dream. But your mind is actually wanting God. And that's why we're having this conversation and watching this movie. Now, I think you're going to really love this next part. Let's watch the clog. Let's look at that entropy. I was just talking to a friend of mine who's a chemist, and she's heard a couple of my talks, and she said, David, please, you don't understand astrophysics. You are not educated in astrophysics. And she said, do not use that word entropy with destruction. Entropy, she said, has nothing to do with destruction. I said, well, what word would you use then? I'll use your word instead. And she said, it's disorder. Oh, okay, not destruction, just disorder. All right, I'll use your word. So this whole world is moving towards disorder. Yeah, thank you. That's the truth. And then when you start to have miracles, you start to care less about the forward arrow of time, because you get happy and content being used by Jesus in this moment. According to Jesus' guidance, suddenly that makes it all right. It doesn't matter what you did in the past. It doesn't matter what you're concerned about the future. When you're lined up with Jesus and the Holy Spirit, where is the entropy then? Everything comes into perfect order in the present moment when you're lined up with the Spirit. That's why you can be happy right now. That's why you don't have to think about the future. You can actually be very, very joyful and happy now, because the Spirit is with you right now, and all you have to do is line up. And it's so simple. It's not even a difficult thing, because it's the most natural thing in the whole universe to line up with the source. If there's going to be one thing easy, that's the easiest thing, to line up with the source. So let's hear what they have to say about entropy and disorder, and how we don't want it. we don't want to believe in the arrow of time anymore, which is just an ego overlay on this dance of images that's just before us. Degrees of messages. Jesus does not see the world this way. Jesus sees everything in perfect order. When the book pages are all over the cemetery, Jesus does not see a mess. He's like, isn't that cute? When an ice cube melts and it suddenly loses its shape and blends into liquid, Jesus does not see that as a state of disorder. He's not like thinking, oh, liquid. Damn these humans, liquid. They let it melt. They let it melt. They could have crunched on that ice, but no. They let it melt. You see, the key is, if you believe in private minds and private thoughts, then you believe in entropy, and you believe in the arrow of time, and you believe you've defined the loaf of bread as moving from an ordered state of nothingness into a disordered state of nothingness. You see? And that's why the very first principle of A Course in Miracles is there's no order of difficulty in miracles. And Jesus was a pretty good demonstration of this quantum field, of this unified perception, because up until that time, it's like it wasn't so common to see people walking out of graves or sepulchres. I love that word, sepulcher. Like Lazarus, Mary, Martha, some of you know the Bible, and oh Lord, if you'd just come earlier, our brother, he's dead, and he's in his grave clothes, and he's got a rock over the sepulcher, and he's smelling up the place. He's decaying. He's decaying flesh. You know, in the Bible, I think it says in the Bible that I think he was in the grave for like 3 days, but in the Urantia book it says no, it was 4 days. This was a stinker. This was a stinker. We're not talking about Yogananda's body. Don will back me up on that. Yogananda, we're not talking about an enlightened mind. We're just talking about your typical human Lazarus, a stinker. If you're in the cave in your grave clothes for 4 days, usually there's a lot of entropy happening inside the cave. But Jesus says, rolls away the stone, and then what does he do? Instead of crying like Mary and Martha, instead of saying, oh yeah, I wish I'd sped up and had a little more motion there, I wish I'd got here faster to save the day like Superman. No, he just looks into the cave and he says, Lazarus, come forth. Now listen, that is the way, the truth, and the life speaking. When you look into a grave and you say, Lazarus, come forth, and Lazarus comes out, stinking and everything. He comes right out. Oh, that's no order of degree and difficulty. Yeah, raise the dead. Whoa, that kind of pokes a hole in entropy. That pokes a little bit of a hole in it. When the blind can see, the lame can walk, when you have people that have been dead and they seem to come back to life, when you have a man who's paralyzed legs, but he has such a faith that when he's near Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life, he says, get me up on that roof and get those tiles off of there and use these ropes to lower me down, because he knows that Jesus is doing a teaching in the living room, and he has such faith that he has that paralyzed body lowered down. And then what does Jesus do in the middle of his teaching? He just turns and he says, arise and walk. These are some strong words. Lazarus, come forth in a grave. Arise and walk. But this is Jesus demonstrating that our unified mind is not bound by the laws of time and space. It's not bound by the ego. It's not bound by our perceptions. It's literally our perceptions come from where our state of mind is. And his mind was whole and complete, and therefore the miracles were not extraordinary experiences. They weren't spectacles. They were natural reflections of a mind that knows what it is, that it's the Son of God, that it's the Christ. So let's hear a little bit more about this entropy thing, because when I was growing up, back before Brian Greene, I remember studying physics, and the predominant view of physicians and physicists that I was growing up with was that the Big Bang happened and the universe was expanding, but eventually that it would slow down expanding and it would reach a state of equilibrium. And I thought, that's kind of an interesting theory. It'll just slow down and stop and reach a place of equilibrium. And then they said it will begin contracting on itself. And instead of a giant explosion of the Big Bang, it will be a giant implosion. Oh, great. Thank you, physicists. That's all I needed to hear. Just like, what's the destiny of the cosmos? A giant implosion. Oh boy, that sounds exciting. So, but that's fusion and integrity. That's really integrating things, but not in a good way. It will all crash together. But now Brian Greene is going to show us that no, the current thinking, the more recent thinking is that entropy accelerates. Oh, so entropy is moving to disorder, and now they're saying it's accelerating. So put that together, accelerating disorder. Is that sounding like hell to you? We don't need fire and brimstone. All we need to know is the latest thinking is that the cosmos is expanding and it's out of control. It's like a runaway freight train. It's going to more and more and more disorder. We got to come back to that loaf of bread, though. That loaf of bread seemed to have a beginning and it seemed to have an end, but that's not real. Who cares when nothing started or when nothing ends? You see, we have to go beyond our typical way of thinking about as if we're inside the loaf of bread, asking questions about the loaf of bread. We need to be more curious about the light that is before the bread. You know, that's what A Course in Miracles is really about. That's what the Gospels are about. Okay, here we go. All right, the scientists are having trouble saying the G word. God. You can see graphically the light that's before, that blazing light that's before the loaf of bread. But the definition of science is the empirical study of the loaf of bread, so they're having trouble. You know, they can't quite get the G word out there, but they don't have to say the G word. They could just say, I am presence. But even for the scientists, they're saying that the more you come back toward the Big Bang, suddenly things get more and more ordered, even when you get closer to the Big Bang. Because the scientists are saying, well, before the big explosion of the Big Bang, there was just a bunch of gases. God doesn't have gas. I'm sorry, you know, God doesn't pass wind and have gas. You know, the I am presence is abstract love and light, and even the gases, the separate gases, you know, that kind of exploded, you know, there's separate gases there, Sue, right? But the physicists are saying, but it's much more ordered. Before you have all the solid things, when you're just back into a gaseous state, it's much more ordered. In fact, you heard the physicists say that probably the most ordered state was the Big Bang. Now, somewhere intuitively you're going, I don't know if that's the highest state of order, an explosion, a bang, a Big Bang. And what Jesus is teaching us is that the present is before time was. Yes, even the gaseous state was seemingly a little bit of separation. And then boom, and then there was a lot, and then there's just been increasing, seemingly. But remember, the Big Bang and the loaf of bread are something that God didn't create. God doesn't have gas, God doesn't explode, and there's no Big Bang in God. That's just the Big Bang of the belief that you can separate your mind from the mind of God. So, okay, here we go. I have to give a little reinterpretation here, but you can see that the scientists are onto it. You see the graphics? In front of that loaf of bread, that is the brightest light I've seen. I think the graphics are fantastic here. This is like teaching us divine metaphysics. All right, it's out of control. That loaf of bread is out of control. And what Jesus says is that a meaningless world engenders fear. What Jesus says is the world was made in hatred, and basically you can't heal what's not real. And that you might want to write that down. You cannot heal what isn't real. You see, we don't care if it's like a car that's gone berserk with the accelerator stuck. We don't care if the disorder and chaos is accelerating. We're not interested if things are getting worse and worse and worse. And maybe you're watching the news and you're having thoughts, oh my God, this is psycho world. I think in the disappearance of the universe, the Ascended Masters told Gary that they have a nickname for this world. It's called Psycho World. But the physicists are saying it's not just Psycho World, but it's Psycho World unleashed, with no end in sight, just accelerating chaos and accelerating chaos. Now, the good news is again, our goal is not to improve the loaf of bread. We're not trying to bake a better loaf of bread. We're not trying to heal what's not real. We're simply praying and using the Gospels and A Course in Miracles to teach us that nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. And herein lies the peace of God, that we have every reason to rejoice that the grace of God and the love of God created us perfect, and we can rejoice that we were created by a loving God, and we can celebrate every moment of every day of gratitude for God creating us perfect, for God creating us as an eternal being. We can celebrate, I am as God created me. That is the one thought that if we accept it fully, that ends the chaos, that ends the randomness, that ends the disordered perception, that ends the attempt to judge this world positively or negatively. I mean, what does positive nothingness and negative nothingness mean to you? To me, it's like nothing from nothing leaves nothing. You gotta have spirit if you want to be with God. It has to be that we are eternal beings. And even if we were tricked into believing in the era of time, into entropy is just not a loving concept. The idea that everything moves to increasing, accelerating disorder. I mean, imagine if we held that in mind and we looked at our daily planner, and then you look at your plans for the day, and you go through it all, and then you go, it's just entropy. There's no point. We wouldn't feel joy if we didn't come to the point of our awakening, which is forgiveness in our mind. We really do need to release these false concepts. Okay, we're on for the final, let's see their final prediction for the cosmos here. Okay, very good. Well, when he said the time is different for all of us, that's actually the first law of chaos in A Course in Miracles, that the truth is different for everyone. And so that's why when you expose these beliefs, you are at the cusp of letting them go, because the laws of chaos all follow from the first law of chaos, that the truth is different for everyone. And Jesus is showing us that there's only one truth, and that's love, and that there's only one God, and that's love, and that there's only one identity, and our identity is a creation of that love, a perfect creation of love. So the next segment will be just a witness to our mind of prayer, of devotion, of dedication, not to try to change the world, but just to go deeply inside to experience the truth of our being. It's really just a witness to the prayer of our heart to want only God, to only desire God, and then to let everything be shown, everything be cared for, everything just to appear without a desire to change the world or to control the world. without a desire to achieve something in form or to progress in terms of form, but just to be able to let all things be shown to us as a witness of the love that we are. So this next segment is going to be a group of women who are called from many different countries, all to a cloistered convent in Massachusetts, about 40 miles south of Boston. I think it's called St. Mary's. And these women are in the order of St. Benedictine. The original group came over many years ago from Ireland and set in motion a very, very devoted life on diving into experience Christ, to know Jesus Christ, to know a direct experience of Jesus Christ, and to pray unceasingly for a direct experience. Many of us have grown up with many memories and many things in our dream that seem to not always be a dedication to know thyself and know Jesus. But this will give us a chance to take a bit of a journey now, not into quantum physics, but into actually just the presence of love that is underneath everything of this world. So this will be a little more slow-paced than our ride of exploding big bangs and gases exploding and getting clogged up with the arrow of time and going towards total randomness and total blackness. But this is more of go into your heart and find out for yourself what is in there. So here we go. Let's go into part 2 now, a little bit of a change of pace. So I want you to just pay attention to more of the question inside, what is it for? Once you begin to have this perspective that all of time and space, all of the cosmos, this cosmic loaf of bread, is just a veil drawn over your mind, over your consciousness, to blind you from the truth, then you start to open up to this question of purpose. Like, what are all these activities in my life for? Am I still striving for future goals? Do I still have future ambitions for the world and for myself? Am I still believing that I need to change the world, that I need to make the world a better place? Do I still have goals, future goals? And you can see with this group, they're starting to settle into a rhythm. And they're sharing things like, I didn't make this decision by myself. Their rhythms are going through the days where it looks like they're winding down with their final of the 7 prayer segments, starting around 7:05, and then winding down maybe to bed, maybe, going around 8 o'clock, waking up around 3, jumping into the first beginning of the prayer cycles at 3:20 a.m., and then looking forward with great anticipation, maybe even zeal for the great silence, that morning time of quiet, early morning hours of just quiet communion with God, with their inner voice, with their inner being. And then moving through their day where they have maybe a brief, for some of the younger ones, maybe a brief work assignment of 2 or 3 hours and making candy. My grandmother Lillian would love this. Wow, just pray and sing and take some walks and study scripture and then go into the great silence and then do it again another day. And you get to, she would have said, and you get to make candy? On top of that, she had a great sweet tooth. Lillian would be like, oy vey, oh my gosh, what a life. A devotional life, and you get to make candy. Looks pretty high tech too. You know, it doesn't look like they're wrapping anything individually. They've got a lot of technology working with them too. But I think it's just a good witness to the mind of once you start to come a little closer into this perception of the world is much ado about nothing. Once you start to realize, oh my gosh, it's a perceptual problem. It's not a political problem. It's not a country problem. It's not a problem of world hunger or world production, the gross national products. It's not a issue of supply chains and people building and growing and building more houses and expanding the gross national product of your country and trying to, once you start to realize it's not really about making the world a better place, it's about your state of mind. It's about what is your heart song. What's the penguin movie? Happy Feet. Wasn't that the whole point of a Happy Feet, was to find your heart song? You know, and in human terms, we might say that's just like finding your calling, finding where your joy is, finding where your contentment is, your peace, finding within yourself where the meaning is, and not looking out to the world to find the meaning. So to me, this is a beautiful kind of extension from our first segment, The Fabric of the Cosmos, where it was a lot of questions about how did it all begin? When did it all begin? How will it end? You know, even in the Truman Show, Sylvia's wearing the button, how will it end, is on the button of her red sweater. And yet there is, even in the Truman Show, that happy scene when he discovers the exit door and he pushes it, and Christoph tries to keep him there, and he goes through the door to meet the very happy Sylvia, who's been praying for his escape. It's interesting when we watch this series here. There's like a slow seeming rhythm of just surrendering over to a calling and not needing to know exactly what the details of that calling will be, not needing to know the future, not needing to know how is it going to work out, how will my life look. You know, you start to get a sense that if your life is prior to time and space, prior to the cosmos, prior to all the images, then prayer becomes much more important. And prayer may have different meanings and connotations in your mind, but really, your prayer is your desire. What is the desire of your heart? And some people might say, I just want to be happy, or I just want to be peaceful or joyful, but then it comes down to the prayer to accept the means that are given. If God has a plan of happiness, of knowing your will is for perfect happiness, and as a human being you don't know what that plan is. You don't know the form. Jesus says in the Course, in the introduction, you know, that the Course is required, but he's talking about the inner peace, the release is required, but free will does not mean you can establish the curriculum, only what you want to take at a given time, and that's in the introduction. Then when you get back into the manual for teachers, you know, he comes even further and says you cannot even decide the form of the curriculum. What a freeing statement. You cannot decide the form of the curriculum. Wow, you mean I don't have to plan my future? You mean I don't have to figure out what I'm going to do with my earth life? You mean if I say yes to you, that you will arrange time and space and lots of miracles to convince me of my true identity, will at least will take me to the point, to this leaping off point where Jesus says in his Course, he said, there is nothing the world is more afraid to hear. I do not know the thing I am, what I'm doing, where I'm going, or how to look upon the world or myself. And yet, he says, when you reach this place, then the truth will tell you of itself. Everything will be revealed effortlessly when you just reach a place of saying honestly, I don't know who I am, where I am going, what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing on planet Earth. It sounds kind of gullible, but it's actually the best surrender you could ever make, where you're basically turning over the revealing of your true nature to the Holy Spirit and say, be you in charge, you guide me. If there's a word that I need to speak, you put the words in my mouth. If there's anything you want me to do, you do it through me. If there's anything at all that I am to face, let me face it with your guidance, and let you carry me through anything that I have judged to be a challenge or a difficulty. And I just can tell you from my heart, it's just spectacular. It's when we resign, as Jesus says, resign now as your own teacher. When you resign of trying to teach who you are, then you allow the great internal teacher, Jesus and the Holy Spirit, to teach you. I was talking recently about teaching is thinking, and Jesus says in the Course, you have taught what you are, but you have not allowed what you are to teach you. In other words, when we teach from ego and we teach from self-concept, all we're doing is thinking we know who we are and trying to teach it and reinforce it in this world. I'm so-and-so, put in a name, and I was born in such and such a place, to such and such a family, I have such and such a story or history. Jesus is saying, you have taught what you are, but you have not allowed what you are to teach you. And this is the great surrender into the great silence where you can pause and you can be still and you can pray in your heart to be shown, to have things revealed. Actually, what seems to be every day will be that. You will see all the signs and symbols around you just when you get into that place of humbleness, of let it be shown to me. Some of you know how much I enjoy writings and teachings of Richard Rohr, and it was funny when I first was reading, I think in his book about the universal Christ, where he was saying, yeah, every day I just pray for at least one humiliation per day. God grant me one humiliation. It sounds funny, but until you start to realize he's just praying to be humble, to be humbled in the presence of God. Show me my connection to you, God. Show me my spiritual reality. Show me the realization of my true, humble self. How beautiful, what a beautiful prayer, what a beautiful gift to just call upon that every day. Here I am, Lord, I have no idea what the day has for me, but I'm with you, and that's all that matters. I don't really care how the day unfolds. I'll happily watch, but I want to watch with you. I want you with me in my heart. So as we watch these sisters, you can see that they come from, we'll see as we move on, they come from different countries, they come from many different backgrounds. They are not alike in terms of personality or in terms of similarities. Some of them have come from no religious background whatsoever. We were talking on the live stream the other day where both Francis and Lisa were both saying they had no religious training, no religious background whatsoever. It's the same with these sisters. They somehow found themselves at this Abbey of St. Mary's, and they don't even quite know how they got there. Some of them, they have some stories, but the more they tell their stories, they just start to see the sameness that's there, and the sameness is Jesus. They see the sameness in their days. Wouldn't it be great if you had an experience of this cosmic loaf of bread where you just started to smile one day and realize that you weren't it, that you had nothing to do with it, and that nothing would wipe the smile off of that face. Imagine going through your days and weeks where you weren't bored, where you weren't restless, where you didn't have this feeling of discontent, this feeling of, is that all there is? Is there any more? Where you never had this thought coming up into awareness, what's next? You know, where you really became quite disinterested in what's next. You became so content in what was in the here and now that you could happily let go of the what's next question. Because I think that what's next question is more haunting than peaceful. What's next in the script? Who cares? Isn't it fun to not know? Isn't it fun to be there and just be shown, please show yourself, reveal yourself? I really think that that's what's under the heart, in the core of the prayers of these sisters. And they're all different ages, they come from different places. So it's not about uniformity, and it's not about conformity, but it's more about stopping and pausing and just letting go of the reins. You know, it's instead of being the driver of the car, it's about slipping over into the passenger seat and then just enjoying the ride in kind of a delightful way. Oh, what adventure! Where are you taking me today? What will I see today? Excitement, excitement. Okay, let's go back to our slowly soft movie here, mini movie. So you're starting to get a feel there from these testimonies of what Jesus calls the involuntary nature of miracles. You know, he says miracles should not be under conscious control because they can be misdirected. Yeah, the ego will even try to jump into miracle working. It's trying to take over everything. It wants control of the spiritual journey. It wants control of the future. It wants control of your body. It wants control of your mind. It is a death wish. And if it had a middle name, it would be control. The ego is very controlling, it's very autonomous. It can be, you probably have felt this in your mind, the ego can be demanding. It's demanding things of you. It's commanding you to follow it and do certain things. And yet you can see with these sisters, while they're speaking, their eyes are lighting up. While they're speaking, the smile comes. You see their teeth. It's involuntary. There's something that is calling them, that is taking over their mind in a good way, because it's the way, the truth, and the life. It's our destiny to be happy. It's our destiny to be joyful. And the best part of it all is it's involuntary. It's not under conscious control. It's like living from your heart, like really just feeling your heart start to bubble. The energy in your heart starts to swirl. And you start getting some ideas, and initially the ego will be just like, what is this? What are you thinking? How could you even think of that as a possibility? And as we saw in a recent movie, the most reluctant convert, C.S. Lewis, it was a pretty strong train of thought of opening up, being open-minded seemingly with all these different, reading the classics and reading about reason and rationality, and a pretty strong belief system. We would call it the I know mind, getting pretty anchored. Like, I know what this is all about, and then things happening like World War I scene on the battlefield of France, or even when he was younger, his mother dying of cancer when he was 9, his father not knowing how to carry on with him and his brother. The circumstances of this world, we'll say the projection of this loaf of bread, is handed over to the Holy Spirit and Jesus, and they know the way. They'll not only get you out of that loaf of bread, they'll teach you were never in it. They're so good. They'll teach you were never separate from God. You don't have to keep asking over and over, how did the separation happen? Because after a while, you'll just feel this presence of love and this little smile inside of you and this little wink. Like, we don't need to think like that anymore. We can go beyond those questions of how did the separation happen. We can go into the experience that it didn't, that it actually didn't happen. That's the correction or the atonement. Go right up into that guidance. Where would you have me be? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? It starts to be like the prayer of your heart, a joyful, gleeful prayer. Like, wow, I'm starting to feel free. And Jesus says, those who've been sleeping a long time do not instantly leap up when their chains are released. Yeah, there may still be some lingering doubts, from the past. But isn't it relaxing to think that you don't have to use your past learning and past experiences to follow and trust in the guidance? You can simply just say yes to the guidance right now. It's a new day dawning. It's a new moment dawning. I don't have to justify the past. I don't have to explain the past. I don't have to please anyone. I don't have to fit into any program or conform to anything of this world. If I unplug my mind from the world, the ego's like, yeah, well, what's going to happen to the world? And you're just not as interested about the world because this loaf of bread is not really drawing your attention anymore. It's like that George Michael song, I bought a ticket to the world, but now I've come back again. Why do I find it hard to write the next line? Oh, I want the truth to be said. That's it. The ego bought our ticket to the world. We seem to use the ticket, but after a while, we wonder, why would I want this ticket? My home is heaven. My home is nirvana. My home is the everlasting, the eternal light of God. I still live in God's mind. I have not vacated. I bought a ticket, but now I'm turning in my ticket to the world. This currency is not worth anything. Turns out the ticket's not worth it. It was a ride. It was like an amusement park ride. And after so many times on the merry-go-round, and especially on that high-speed roller coaster ride, I am now giving my ticket back. I would rather have the stationary joy of heaven and the light of heaven than for a ticket and a ride that I am no longer interested in. And then it does get interesting. It's like what these sisters are talking about is they're talking about a calling that they received, and everybody receives the calling in the way that can serve the release of the ego. There's no special forms. It's not any more special to be a curious quantum physicist like Brian, who's pondering what's it all about and thinking that he's looking for meaning. He's searching for a real lasting sense of meaning. He's even pondering watching his cat jump off of a ledge, and he's starting to ponder, what's it mean? What's it all about, you see? And the nuns are praying, what's it all about? Even the new ones, what's it all about? Even the sister that's the head of vocations, that's just symbols, because there is no set form that is special. There is no set form that's more special than another form, because they're all inside the loaf of bread. All the forms were made up by the ego. But the main thing is am I willing to resign as my own teacher and just say, Holy Spirit, teach me. Holy Spirit, show the way. What an adventure. I'm telling you now, you can't mess this up. You cannot really ever mess it up, because it's all part of a beautiful plan that's just being shown in the moment. And all you really have to say yes to is to be happy. And that can't be that difficult to say, I'm happy now. It's got to be the easiest thing that there ever is, just to say, I'm happy. I'm going to be singing my song like the birds are singing. I'm going to be dancing my dance. I'm going to be flowing with what my intuition is tickling my heart with. There was some point in the parable of David when, I don't know whether, maybe it was when I was in my 20s, but I started to have these experiences where it felt like somebody had a feather and they were tickling on the inside of my heart with the feather. It felt great. I didn't know what it was. I didn't call it, at the time, Jesus. I didn't call it spirit or whatever, but the tickling felt really good. Like somebody's tickle, 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 tickle. Ooh, ooh, ah, you know. And occasionally I would have a cat or something, or a dog, and I'd tickle the cat's belly, and then the cat would be all happy and everything. I said, yeah, that's how I feel. Tickling heart. Happy, tickling heart. That's good. Because even if it's that, that's all you need. The ego is sunk. When you start to feel the tickle in your heart, the ego's days are limited. It's just counting the days until it disappears, because the tickle will take over. And that's what I think I see in these nuns, you know. There's some kind of a glow and a presence. It's not like they were dragged into the convent. It's more like they came from all places of the world, and then they're kind of like, pinch me. How did I get here? How is it that I can pray 7 times a day, and I get to make candy, and I get to sleep 7 hours, and then I get to go into the great silence. Ooh, another day of the great silence. You know, you see, for the spirit, this is like regeneration. It's like you're getting happier and happier. And the best thing is, you just have to let the spirit orchestrate it for you. You don't have to wear habits, and you don't have to wear a uniform. I don't wear a uniform. I'm just in a pretty bright shirt with a fish on it today, you know. I didn't even get to pick my clothes. Isn't that great? You know, I don't have to worry about putting on the same thing every day. I go to my closet, the arm reaches out, oh, we got a big, bright color today. All right, let's go for it. Some sandals, some shorts. I don't have a uniform, but I kind of feel like I'm in the convent somehow. I'm kind of, it just looks like I'm out loose in the world, but actually I'm kind of in this inner monastic convent experience where it's just joyful. It's just rich. It's dripping with meaning. It's dripping with the happiness and joy. You just want it to drip, drip, drip all day long. But the thing is, it doesn't matter the form. The form is given you. You just say yes, and then you just watch how everything comes to you very easily. And that's what these sisters are all saying. They don't actually know how they got there. And the one even thought, she said, I like to dance, and I'm the dancing, playful one, and certainly this can't be my vocation. And yet she gets the big smile on her face like, look at me. Look at me. Wow, I'm able to be my happy, joyful, expressive self, and yet of all the places, she looks like on her face, like never thought I'd be in a convent. And the truth is, we're not ever in this world. That's the beautiful thing. You know, that's where they try to lock you up with the psychiatrists. When you get too happy and you start to laugh for no earthly reason. And sometimes you can't stop laughing, but there's no joke. You don't even need the joke. and you're laughing anyway. And it's a lot of laughter. You know, I think we do find as we go through our days, we aren't looking for reasons to laugh. It's like it comes through us. It comes burst out of our hearts. And then why not have a happy, joyful, playful day? Even now we're going through transitions. You know, we're starting to do these worship services and sing, but but we should just make a joyful noise unto the Lord. We're not into perfectionism. We don't all have to be Whitney Houston and Barbra Streisand and Celine Dion and so forth. We don't have to be Pavarotti. We don't have to be, some brilliant singer to sing your song. Let your heart song come through. Just let it come through. And know that it's just perfect for the whole universe, just as it comes. Don't compare, don't contrast, don't think this is some kind of performance. You're not to be the performer, you're to watch the whole thing with Jesus. And when you watch the whole thing, you watch in happiness. You don't have to have performance anxiety, because Christ will do it through you. Christ will sing your songs. Christ will speak your words. Christ will live your life until the body starts to just fade in your awareness. Fade, fade, fade away. So let's hear a little bit more from these little twinkling sparklers who look like they're nuns. What a joke. These are really happy people, but they're they're watching the whole convent thing go on. Beautiful, 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 reverent glimpse. Yeah, that's just so lovely. Yeah, I think there's so many that, like these sisters, have just followed the scripture, the Bible, and there's many, many famous teachings in the Bible, but probably the most famous lines of the Bible is, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but should have eternal life. And then Jesus just adds one little word to help us understand that. For God so loved the world that he gave it to his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should have eternal life. If we look at the time episode with the Big Bang and the loaf of bread of all the cosmos of time and space being projected from the ego, that bright light that's before the Big Bang is the forgiven world. That bright light right before the Big Bang is the happy dream. That's what Jesus was meaning, that he gave it to his only begotten Son. If the Son fell asleep, what would be a greater gift than giving a beautiful, happy dream to the sleeping Son and saying, "Awaken, my beloved. I love you with a love that will never end. And my gift to you is the Holy Spirit, who has a whole new world, a new fantastic point of view. And that's my gift to you. Before you come home to eternity, you're going to have a happy dream." That's actually the goal of forgiveness, is a happy dream. And what more could you ask for in regards to this world of images, but that you watch it in a sense of happiness, a feeling of joy, a feeling of happiness, with gratitude for every brother, for every sister, regardless of the form, whatever seeming part they play. You know that who they are is not the part. Who they are is the light, the love that's beyond the part, beyond the image. So, in one sense, that's, if we bring our two segments together, that bright light right before the loaf of bread is the light of the Holy Spirit. If you go back to that light, there's Jesus with his arms open wide, saying, "Come unto me, all that who are weary and burdened, and I shall give you rest. Come back into this gentle, soft perspective of the world, this forgiven world, this happy dream. Come and accept the gift. Realize that any problem you ever thought you had was it's just a loaf of bread it's just a trick. That God's will was always for us to be joyful and happy and never to experience anything but love, because that's all God is love. So, wow. Thank you for joining me on this journey. My goodness. What a lovely ride we have here as we softly bask in the afterglow of this beautiful love. And it's beautiful where we can, they talk about in the Middle East when they have a school with Arabs and Jews that all come in under one roof and interact and forgive and live in harmony. And today we went from science into the devoted religious life with a happy song in between, running to the light. So we're really healing our mind. We're really letting go of all distinctions of duality and multiplicity when we go into the quantum realm and the quantum field and the happy dream and the forgiven world. Wow. We're going back into our mind deep, 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 right there with Christ, leading us on, cheering us on to realize we are so loved by God. So, yeah, this is the time where we can have some interactions, and I so enjoy the interactions. I just love watching your faces. We've got a big screen here, so I'm talking to all of you and seeing all your emotions and your faces and everything coming up and clearing, as we go through this beautiful healing process. So, yeah, I will just open it up. It looks like our Spanish community over there is there. And there's Amanda.
Thank you.
Esta última película ha sido
This last movie has been
una respuesta a una oración.
an answer to a prayer.
Maika y yo hemos dedicado
Micah and I have left behind all our life,
a Jesús
given it over to God, to Jesus.
con esta comunidad.
And with this community,
Estamos aprendiendo a confiar en
we are learning to trust and not think about the future,
que viene.
to think about next month, who's going to come.
Han habido momentos
There have been moments in these last few months that have been very intense,
donde me mantenía fuerte en
where I've been trying to be strong
lo privado,
with the teachings of no people pleasing and no private thoughts, but it's been difficult at some times.
pero aún así
But even then,
seguía hacia adelante.
I kept going forward.
Esta casa, este lugar,
This house, this place,
era todo lo que ellas decían.
it was everything that they were saying.
Tan bonito porque
It was so beautiful.
parecía que tenemos
That silence that we have here many times,
ese orar por todo.
that
A nivel
praying for everything, and the level
yo aquí, por ejemplo,
when I started here, for example,
estoy feliz porque
I am very happy
estoy sola.
because I'm alone.
Estoy limpiando su altar.
I'm cleaning his altar.
Maika cortando leña.
Micah
Otros recogiendo olivas.
and others picking up leaves from the trees.
Pero sobre todo es
But more than that, it's the union that I feel with many that have come through here.
aquí a Mónica.
I have here Monica, who's been here almost 3 months,
Y es una bendición.
and it's been a blessing. to have her here.
Candela y Chema
Candela and Chema,
es un testigo para mí
it's been a witness for me
de ver mi inocencia.
of my innocence.
Maika,
Micah,
no tengo palabras.
I don't have words.
Solo puedo decir gracias.
The only thing to say thank you. At the end of the day, I don't have a question. Sorry, David. But my body was shaking and I knew I had to talk. I knew that I had to express and share this gratitude that I'm feeling in my heart.
Porque solo soy feliz cuando
Because I'm only happy when I'm in prayer, when I'm in that silence where there's no words, where I only go within.
cuando vienen esos pensamientos.
When those thoughts come up that are egoic, it doesn't matter. I don't fear them. They're not me.
Testigos que llegan
Witnesses that come have been so beautiful. The other day with Tanya from Germany, what she said was so beautiful. Miguel,
no sé,
all the things that are coming up. I don't know. It's like,
es como sentir
it's like feeling that, yes, I'm innocent. I'm worthy.
quiero darte las gracias
I want to give you the thanks, David,
por tu fe y confianza.
for your faith, your trust.
Y solo soy feliz entregándole
And I'm only happy giving him my life
y siguiendo hacia adelante porque
and keep going forward because
la gratificación es muy grande.
the gratitude I have is so big. Those who come through here,
Es, es un reencuentro realmente con Dios.
it's a re-encounter with God,
A Dios,
a remembering God, like your book
con Maika
with Micah.
es un tesoro.
It's a treasure,
Delante para
Jesus, that Jesus has given me.
y todos en realidad.
And everyone, really, the community,
Cuando
this
la veo,
house.
o veo a Pedro, veo a Linda, o a
When I see Peter or Linda or Susanna, it doesn't matter who. They're only names and bodies, but it's the feeling that I feel.
cada vez siento mucho más amor.
And I feel so much love.
Silencio, porque este
That silence unites us because this place is accompanying me, is helping me to find him.
muy bonito.
And it's so beautiful. So beautiful.
Que gracias.
So thank you.
Quiero decir nada más.
And I don't want to say anything else, just thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, and it's so beautiful, our connection and the deep purpose and silence that we share. And, I lived over there in Spain for a while, briefly at our center in Mallorca, and got to go around Spain and go into churches and monasteries, convents, Montserrat, and all the great traditions, even in time, of those that have dedicated themselves to Christ in the silence. And I noticed some of the old convents and monasteries were breaking down, or they were turned into hotels or restaurants and everything. But I always knew that this purpose was the whole purpose for the world, and that it would just come and be given again to, I think the word they used in the movie, consecrated, a very devoted, single purpose for everything that seems to happen, every person that comes, every person that goes, every leaf that falls there on the mountain, all has the purpose of the blessing of God and the blessing of Christ. And so, even your trips, a couple trips to Mary Magdalene's cave was all for that too. In France, it's just this is the consecrated purpose that everybody's praying for. And then when we move into it, then we feel such a deep love. The names don't matter and the places don't matter anymore, but the prayer of the heart, the presence, is so strong. It just kind of radiates and sends out love and light to every place in the whole cosmos, not just the earth. the whole cosmos is lit up with this love and devotion. So I'm just so grateful, and every day I just wake up and ask Jesus to just show me, what do you want? What will bring a blessing to everyone? And that is the greatest prayer we can have, because we're all the same one. we finally are experiencing the silence that we are the same one. We don't even have words for it, not together or apart, or location doesn't mean anything. It's just all love. So thank you for pouring out, and when I'm glad when you shake, then it's time to something's coming through. Time to let it through. Thank you, Amanda. Love you, and Micah and Monica. They're all. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. Karen. Hi, Karen.
Hi, David. I just
Hi.
wanted to say hi. And I was too late getting my application in for the Mexico retreat, so I decided to just come to Costa Rica, Central America anyway, and just be here. And I am so grateful to have met you. And I saw you in Lafayette. That, remember? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I loved all the quantum physics and the loaf of bread. it's nice, the loaf of bread. And I'm really happy that I'm that expression, or the light that is occurring before the loaf of bread, or around the loaf of bread, or within the bread, whatever. And I really love the marriage of the quantum physics with this devotional, beautiful life. And I cried through the whole devotional film. I'm not planning on going to a monastery because my ministry apparently is out in the world. And the Holy Spirit just expresses everywhere. And I love coming to Central America, and I love going to different countries. I used to be a flight attendant back in the day, and a friend of mine who still works for the company gives me these tickets, and I'm just pure joy walking through airports and talking to people. I talk to people on the plane. They're trying to get their work done, but
You get their ear.
Just
Your
for a
joy
minute.
gets their ear.
Yeah, I don't disturb them for very long. But I was, for a long time, I used to go on retreats with Adi Ashanti, and we had a big Sangha kind of a thing. And that had its moments and its life, and it never goes away, of course, the results of that. So I had that it's the same as what those nuns are experiencing, the same, the silence and the aloneness, and but within, like, there's 350 people, and we're all that one walking, and we're all holding that sacred integrity for each other. And I'm getting the same feeling in this community. I was going to call it yours, but it's ours.
Our community.
Well, yeah. Well, and beyond, because it's extending everywhere. And you are, for me, maybe it's not that I need permission or examples, but you're kind of permission maker, an example of being that way at work and being that way in the world and being that way in quiet. And there, like the nuns were saying, there's no difference between work life. I work hard, but there's no difference between work life and social life. And like, it's all the same presence. It's all the same Holy Spirit working through. And some of those relationships at work are tough. They're not, most of them are great, but there's the occasional ones that are very, very difficult. And I know I don't want to go into a monastery because I know for a fact that same stuff is going to show up there. So I'm perfectly fine dealing with it in a secular world. But I just wanted to also thank you and thank this community. And I love that this exists, and I love all the things that you're doing. And I just love that the Holy Spirit is just starting to express more and more. And there's all this joy. And so last night we flew into San Jose Airport in Costa Rica, but it was fogged in and they tried landing twice. And I'm like, holy something. I won't say it on camera. But I was standing by the wing praying. I'm like, angels, you better land this airplane because you guys fly. So make this thing fly. And, we went around a few times, then we landed in another part of the country, and it was I didn't get to the hotel till like 8 hours later. We were so close. We almost touched the ground, and then they took off again. It was just fogged in so badly. And so, and it's just a full airplane full of people and, inconvenienced. But I don't know. I was just feeling so much, like the joy is like coming out the cells and the presence and the love. And I was just I'm having too much fun. We're in a situation where a lot of people are having some difficulty. So I won't bother them too much, but I'm still going to look them in the eyes and look them in the face, and with that sense of everything's all right, even though it's not going according to our plans and it's kind of inconvenient and doesn't feel great, but I love you anyway, and I don't know, I don't know how to explain that, but it's just this just that feeling of love, even in those like tough moments for people, without being in their face, without going, oh, I'm the one who's happy. It's no. This is like meant to be. And all these strangers don't feel like strangers to me. So anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just going on and on. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I just wanted to express and thank you and just say, wow, what a great day.
Oh, thank you, Karen. Thank you. Yeah, I've had that. My trips down to Costa Rica and down to Colombia sometimes, flying like through thunderstorms and lightning storms and the plane shaking all over the place. And I do think of that movie Fearless with Jeff Bridges, where he's up there and he's so calm. As the plane's going down, he's just walking slowly, calmly up to sit with the little boy, and complete grace and stillness. And it's a mystical experience every time I watch that scene. But it's beautiful too. It's, I know how much you love the quantum, and I remember talking to you up there in Northern California, and here it is. It's a perfect example of how the Holy Spirit uses what you believe in and what you've experienced, as a flight attendant, and then getting handed these tickets to go shine your light and converse with people in planes and in airports and wherever you go. And it just makes the point how it's not about the form, but it's all about just the involuntary flow of the miracle, just being in our joy and receiving the means or the props that we need, the theater and it can look a variety of ways. So you're showing, after that, our quantum movie, and then our devoted life movie, and there you are in Costa Rica, shining your joy, and just demonstrating again. It's all about the presence, and just surrendering and being in that presence, and letting go of everything else. So thank you, Karen. Thank you. We all feel you. We're all right there with you in Costa Rica. Beautiful. And there's AC. Oh, wonderful, AC.
Uh, there's so many experiences that this movie brought up, and the commentary you were making to begin with, and like being gifted the opportunity to go with 3 of the early ones to a Trappist monastery with Lisa, and I loved it there. I loved that experience, and there's a contrast experience that happened about a week ago that is that I really would like to speak to, and get your feedback, because it was so devastating and so crushing that I haven't really recovered for that or know what to do. But I was sitting watching a movie. Maybe it was Mr. Nobody. Anyway, it was a movie, and I've been in a lot of silence lately, and there was a knock at the front door, and the minute I heard that knock, it was like my heart went down, and it just felt crushed and devastating. I knew it was my daughter at the door, and it was like all this conflict. Do I answer that door? No, I can't. I can't answer the door. Can't answer that door. I can't let her in. And hating myself for experience being so horrible and so crushing, and what am I doing here? Am I just hiding away and not communicating with anybody in this little apartment for senior people? And how could I do that? How could I just not answer the door? And I had been leaving my phone on silence because I was thinking I really need to pray about everything and really be in the silence and be with God. And there have been quite a few times when I've been peaceful about, like I am I guess the conflict of thinking I'm a person and knowing that I am one with God. There are 2 different things there, 2 different identities. And so I hadn't been listening to any voicemails, because she had been calling me like 50 times a day, and when she calls, she's ridiculing, tearing me apart, saying I'm evil and all this stuff. But during that movie today, it's like I am torn between people pleasing and wanting to be devoted totally to God. And so that was the inner conflict there. I think that I feel like I want to love her totally, so totally that it's not a body that I'm loving, it's the Christ. It's feeling at one with that and joining her in that knowledge. But anyway, you I don't know what I'm asking, except for I would like some resolution to this feeling like I can't really communicate with her. I've never been able to really have a heart-to-heart talk with her ever. So I'm torn apart right now. And my whole reason for coming and coming out to Cincinnati was to learn how to love her unconditionally, see her the way Jesus and God see her. Love that kind of love. That's still my desire to just be in that love, experience that, not experience these fearful things or the anger that's so consuming that I feel like I'm going to explode in a million pieces. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the end to the conflict between people pleasing and just devotion to God is really just taking it in and giving yourself permission to lead an inspired life, like a life that where you feel the joy, you feel the happiness, you feel expansive, and giving yourself full permission to go into that. And to do that, of course, that will automatically, the light of that will drop off the shoulds and the oughtos and the old concepts of, let's say, the mother-daughter concepts of this world that the ego set up, full of animosity and conflict and things like that. And, it kind of reminds me of those sayings in the Bible about where Jesus said, father will be turned against son for my name's sake, and mother will be turned against daughter for my name's sake. You're wanting to be inspired and extend your joy and the love in your heart, and then you're just praying to the Holy Spirit to bring to me the opportunities and the ways, even if it's here in that community, retired community, let me bring that soft, gentle blessing to anyone that I meet. But I think that the only way that the guilt seems to creep in, like seep in through a crack, is somehow the feeling that something could have been different in your life or should have been different. But ever since I've known you, that's been our joinings of like, nope, things could not have been any different. And you are a child of God, and you're opening your heart, and you're wanting to live just an inspired life, a life where you feel connected and aligned. And as I've traveled around the world many times, I've met so many people that they feel like their old life has nothing to resemble to their new life. I had a friend who was a belly dancer, in New York City, and she was, every time we would talk, she would talk about her life, and she would say, well, that was BC. But she wasn't talking about BC in the timeline. It was before the Course, and her AC was after the Course. And they didn't have a meeting point. You know, well, BC, I was this way, and now AC, I'm happy to report this is my joy, this is my love. So, you know, it's only coming from an expectation of something should have been different, or I should have been treated differently, or she should have been treated differently, or it's like saying something was wrong there in the past. And that's BC. You know, that is not AC at all. That is not. You deserve a life of inspiration, and so it's kind of an undoing of this self-concept that was there. It's a rinsing. It was just another rinsing. But Jesus just wants you to know, it's like you can let that go, that even whatever it seemed to be, you can just say, oops, I don't think I want to see this differently. And I'm not projecting a future where I have to fix something, or where I have to see that something went wrong and I have to should be more Christ-like, or I should be more this or that. You can just let go of those shoulds, you know, and moment by moment just live your inspired life. Sometimes that does involve turning the phone off. You remember I was talking today about technology and watches being invented and clocks, and the old days where people would just look up and say, oh, it's somewhere near noon or something. But then even with phones, there can be expectations around answering them, or especially if you're getting 40 or 50 voicemails a day, then, you know, after a while, your finger for listening or deleting, that's too much finger work. They just turn it off. And you have to feel the blessing of when you have your prayer time and you're there with God, that's your devotion. You know, it's okay. You're not letting anybody down by being still and being in a gentle prayer life with God, with the Spirit. So thank you for coming on. I know it's helpful too, just to sometimes express whatever it was, and then that's part of that. It's like a psychic burp. You're just burping that intensity out and saying, okay, I'm coming back to my prayer life, which is very important to me, and I will put that as a priority. I will not compromise in that. Thank you, AC. Lovely to see you again. Thank you. Okay, we're zooming along here this afternoon, but I see Kat.
Hello everybody. Hello, David.
Hi.
Boy, am I glad I decided to join this movie gathering at the last minute. It was just what I needed. I love the metaphysics. I really like that part, but I'm discovering that that's not the important part. You know, I'm just so drawn to devotion and silence now. And at the beginning of the summer, I think it was, a few of us in the community felt called to meditate together in the morning. I think it's lesson 124. Let me remember I'm one with God. And then we meditate after that on the lesson of the day. And that's been that's made such a huge difference. For me on the West Coast, it's kind of early in the morning. So I related to the nuns getting up at 3:20 to devote to God. And I just feel that that's so important. I've seen the difference it's made. And I'm, as you know, I'm headed to Mexico to Ricky's retreat the end of the month. And I really don't have a plan after that. My passport's renewed, and I'm hoping Spain is in my future. But I got to tell you, a lot of fear is coming up right now. A lot of, boy, it seems to be like fear about the body, of course. You know, I'm experiencing a lot of physical pain, and sitting with Jesus, I'm don't know what that is gonna bring for me. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm completely clueless about what any of this is going to look like. And there's definitely some fear there, but there's also just a deep gratitude that I feel called to follow my heart and to devote my life to Jesus. And I don't know where that's going to take me, and I don't know how that will look. And I'm just so grateful for you guys and this community. I kind of feel like the nun that was so grateful that there was a place to go where she could be in devotion to God. And I'm grateful for you, David, and for all of you for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you're with us. We're holding you in prayer as you take your trips. I remember you telling about the one-way ticket and then just going to show up and that is the trust. That's where the faith really comes in, to take the step that you really feel called to take, and then to trust that the other steps shall certainly follow, shall certainly be given. And that's how we expand. We build our trust, we build our faith with that. It's not something we were taught usually when we were younger. You know, we were just trying to survive. we weren't trying to expand our faith or deepen our trust, but I just know so many people who have taken those steps and they've just trusted and gone forward, and then are quite happily surprised and amazed at everything that comes. Because where we feared something would be sacrificed or something would be taken away or lost, we do get that happy surprise of wow, I'm cared for. And that, for me, has been the most important thing on the journey. You're right, the metaphysics, you know, for me, it was the stepping in, the practical application of pray and listen and follow that actually brought the fruits of the warm-heartedness and the love and the friendliness. And the metaphysics are like the scaffolding. You know, they give us a little bit of scaffolding to approach the edge. And then when we jump off, that's just a pure deep dive of trust and faith, you know. And we feel grateful for everything that helped us move in the right direction. So we're just so much with you, and I'm so glad that you, even at the last minute, just said, oh, I think I'm going to sign up. And then, you know, that's a good example right there of how the blessing comes one little step at a time when we follow. Yeah, but thank you. Thank you, Kat. Have a beautiful retreat. It's coming up soon. So I can see Monica, I see you over there. I send my love and wishes to you. Happy flight back to Chile. I think back to South America. And Wesley and Angie, I see you there too. You're in my heart. So thank you. Thank you all. Many blessings.